فلتني أقرأ لكم يمكن أقرأ لكم مثلا إيه حتتين، واحدة عن المدينة وواحدة في أول الانترودكشن. هنا بقى هنروح للإنجليزي بما إنه مكتوب بالإنجليزي، ولو إنه أنا حاليا شغالة على الترجمة. Okay, so yeah, actually let me do something else. Okay. ده 28 يناير جمعة الظهر. واحنا بالليل ونزلنا وسط البلد علشان عارفين، عشان كانت منى طلعت خبر، وطلع خبر ان في جامع. ده كان اول مره نعرف عن مسجد عباد الرحمن اللي هو ورا التحرير، بين التحرير والأدار، انه مستشفى ميداني وكده. فكان طلع قول ان في جامع صغير ورا التحرير فيه جرحى، واللي يقدر ان هو اوف شارع ما بين التحرير ومحمد محمود، ما بين شارع، واللي يقدر ان هو يروح كده. فكنا نزلنا أنا هدخل من النص هنا. As we walk through downtown, دلوقتي it's about مثلا الساعة 12 بالليل, walking through downtown, trying to find the game. As we walk through downtown, the sense of being in a film hits me. One of those urban apocalypse movies, where the familiar features of Manhattan, its general Manhattan, are eerily recognizable through the flood, hurricane, nuclear destruction. The streets, the buildings are the same, but they're dark and semi-empty. The shops are shuttered, litter seems to be floating around at knee level, there's rubble on the streets and the lights are out and there's no police, no traffic police, no guards on banks, nothing. سامعني ولا أمسك المايك؟ ماشي؟ Okay. In neighborhoods across the country, through the night of this Friday that will become known as the Day of Wrath, the regime killed hundreds of Egypt's young. Police and security men drove cars and trucks into groups of protesters. Snipers shot young men and women from the rooftops of the Ramses Hilton, the American University, the Egyptian Museum, and the Dakhliya. Troops fired on them with shotguns and rifles and automatics. The thug militias, the Baltagis, burned them with Molotov cocktails and battered them with stones, ceramics, and marble. Soldiers broke down and cried and were comforted by the revolutionaries. Families will spend months of heartbreak, finding out and trying to prove how their children were killed. Brave doctors and lawyers will speak up for them. The Dakhliya will continue, as I write, to deny responsibility. Now, in the darkened and derelict heart of our city, we come out in Midan Avenue. And because we're out of communications, we don't know that 3 streets down, the young people, the Shabab, are taking on the well-hated Dakhliya, attacking the massive fortified building in Lazuri with their bare hands, improvised weapons, and the anger of many years. When my aunt Awatif Toufi got married, she moved into a flat in Lazuri. I was 8 years old, and I used to go and stay with her often. And so alongside Ataba and Abdin, my childhood landscape acquired the oddly named Lazuri. Odd because of the tickly effect of the heavy za and the gha so close together. And because unlike Ataba and Abdin, it wasn't a word that meant anything in Arabic. Soon I learned that Ogli was Turkish for son of, and I would demonstrate precocity in front of my parents' leftist friends by saying I was staying at Lazarevich. Unlike Ataba, which was always connected with bustle and commerce, and Abdiya, which was the royal and then presidential palace. Exclusively, La Zoghli, for me, was the bridal setting up of a new home. A home that was an alternative to how my parents did things. When my mother was 12, she fell ill with rheumatic fever. This meant that she got to lie on sofas and read, while her 9-year-old sister had to step into the traditional domestic role of eldest daughter. These roles were to last all their lives. Fatma, Fifi, and later Mama Fifi, the brainy intellectual, Tufi, the keeper of tradition. So when she married and moved to La Zoghli, Tufi's flat was a demonstration of the proper way of doing things. Though small, it had a salon, drawing room, and sofra, dining room, the two pillars, it seemed, of every Egyptian household except my parents, and whose very names reflected the two dominant cultures to which the Egyptian bourgeoisie was enthralled, French and Turkish. The drawing room chairs were upholstered in pale blue brocade, and the windows had soft white cotton curtains, which, when Tufi and her husband moved back into the family home a few years into their marriage to look after my grandfather, had to be extended by double their length to fit her old windows. When she died 9 years ago, and we had to dismantle the Ataba house, and I washed and folded the curtains, I realized that the repeated pattern of 3 slim horizontal pleats halfway down each curtain had been her solution to disguising the joining seam. I sat with the curtain on my knee and the pleat between my fingers and thought how she had always done that, made do and patched up and fixed the world with results of originality and elegance. But La Zoghli most importantly had a balcony, where on summer nights we had a full view of the screen of the open-air cinema La Zoghli. No bedtime, no restrictions on what you could watch, the absence, when it comes down to it, of my father's regulations. La Zoghli was freedom with a prime seat at a summer cinema every night. From here I watched River of Love, The Other Man, Rumor of Love, A Beginning and an End. My aunt, as I said, moved back to Ataba, and La Zoghli dropped off my map for decades, until in 2000, when Egyptians started mobilizing in support of the Palestinian Intifada, it came back. La Zoghli was disappearances. La Zoghli was torture. La Zoghli was the Dakhliya and the State Security Intelligence Bureau, the Mabahat and the Dawlat. It was also the coroner's office, which habitually covered up the crimes of the Dakhliya and the State Security Intelligence Bureau. Now, unbeknownst to us in Babylou, 3 streets down, the young revolutionaries are attacking La Zoghli, and the security establishment, about to lose the streets of the country, is determined to keep La Zoghli. 5 snipers are on the roof. Snipers whose existence the ministry would deny, despite their images captured on film. As we stand in Babylou, I can hear a voice over a tannoy. I can't make out the words, but the voice is repeating them, and it sounds like an appeal. It comes from the Midan end of Tahrir Street, where I expect the mosque to be, so I start walking up towards it. It's dark, and the shop on the corner with the best kharoub juice in town is shuttered. Men walking down warn me to turn back. I can hear the shots and I can smell the acrid smoke, but a lesson learned from time spent in Palestine is that unless there is an insurmountable physical obstacle, and that includes a man or a woman with a gun, keep going. So I keep going and find that the voice is coming from Amir Adadar Street to my left. This is a house of God and a hospital. There are wounded people here and doctors trying to help them. You must not attack this house. Your brothers and sisters are here. This is a house. It's an entrance you might easily miss. One of the magical architectural features of downtown Cairo is the pedestrian passages that run between or through buildings. My grandfather's house had one of those. You walk through them undercover, linking from street to street. Some of the wider passages have stalls or shops. This entrance is to a passage that links Amir Adadar Street to Tahrir. I didn't know it existed, and I only see it because of the knot of people and cars outside it. This is a house of God and a hospital, the voice declares, and there's rubble and smoke and the only people in the street are around that small entrance, almost hidden by a large sign for mobile phones, so that's where I go. I edge past the hurried toing and froing, and I'm inside, and the space is maybe 20 meters long by 8 meters wide. If I walk straight through, I come out on the east side of Tahrir. But to my left, there's a waist-high railing that runs the length of the passage. And the space beyond it, the width of some 6 meters, is a small mosque. Well, not a proper mosque, but a space that has Quranic verses hanging on the freshly painted walls, and a prayer niche to guide you towards Mecca, and rows of prayer mats on the floor, and on the mats there lie young men covered in blood. And other young men are running in through the Midan entrance, carrying yet more young men covered in blood, and lowering them carefully onto the mats. And by the walls, figures are stretched out, shrouded in dark blankets. And then I see a white light at the center of it all, and it's coming from a slight figure crouched on the floor, doing something to the chest of a young man. And the figure has a face of such intense seriousness and compassion that I cannot look anywhere else. And I stand and watch her until she finishes and straightens up and is revealed to be Monamina, one of the leaders of Physicians Without Rights, and my sister's friend, and the mother of a fiery and popular activist. I step towards her, and the young man runs up between us and puts his head in my eye line. Even as I say journalist, he's asking, is the pellet still there? Can you take it out or should we leave it? I have to get back to the Shabab. The Shabab are storming the Dakhliya. Mona tells me she knows 2 of the young fighters. 2 weeks ago, they were scared to report that their boss was bullying them. Look at them now. I look. Wounded young men everywhere, and other young men and women tending to them. Medicines and dressings stacked in neat piles by the walls. People come to talk to me. I write fast. Their message is urgent. They're using live ammunition. They're using shotguns. Look, empty cartridges made in the USA. Look, look, his legs aren't working. 2 have died. No one wants to go to hospital because they report them and they get taken away. Eye injuries, head injuries. They're shooting to kill. Then the tear gas floods in again, and the exhortations on the loudspeaker grow louder, disbelieving, angry. Soldiers of Egypt, police of Egypt, your brothers and sisters are in the protection of this house. Young men try to carry the wounded out into the air from the back. Someone gives me a gas mask, someone else gives me 2 empty cartridges. They will sit on my mantelpiece. This is what we get from USAID. This is the aid they hold over us. The gas clears. A collapsed Central Security soldier is carried in. He's given emergency treatment, and his weapon is emptied before he is set free. He sobs as an older man pats his shoulder. Weeks from now, we will find out that soldiers went absent without leave and lived on the Midan until the military broke the sit-in. Now, I make a list of things the hospital needs: betadine, dressings, spray anesthetic, sutures, needles, surgical gloves, painkillers. So, that's kind of an example of how the book works. That it uses a link, like Nazum, to go into something personal and then come out again and into what's happening and into the present, and then it goes up and then goes down and off it goes again. And that's really what it does more or less all the time.